Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, Crossing New Frontiers to Conquer Today's Challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
My quintessential question of the 1970s and 80s was this: how can I solve the toughest problems arising in mathematical physics and solve them across the new Philip Emeagwali Internet? And how can I uniquely name each of my 65,536 processors that outlined and defined my new internet? I visualized my emails as sent along 16 orthogonal directions and received via 16 times 2 raised to power 16 email wires that fed my data and answers from my initial boundary value problems of mathematical physics and fed them into my 2 raised to power 16 identical commodity off-the-shelf processors that were tightly coupled to each other and that shared nothing between each other. I imagined my initial boundary value mathematical physics problems of weather forecasting as my metaphor for an angry wind that was blowing across my 1 binary million email wires and sweeping my data from present to future and from fiction to forecast. I visualized processors everywhere and an island of processors that became one virtual supercomputer that is a new internet, that is a new global network of 64 binary thousand processors. I visualized my data from that extreme scale weather forecasting as blown by an electronic wind and blown across the 1 binary million email wires and blown to 16-bit long email addresses that each had no @ sign and no .com suffix. I uniquely named each of my 2 raised to power 16 processors by 16 characters from 2 true or false alphabets. The 2 raised to power 16 unique strings of 16 zeros and ones camouflaged my new internet. Within that new internet was where I discovered practical parallel processing and discovered it as the technology that makes the supercomputer super. That new internet remains invincible as an internet. What was visible was the fastest computation that I performed on the 4th of July 1989 that was highlighted in the June 20, 1990 issue of the Wall Street Journal and that redefined my new internet as my new virtual supercomputer. I was the first supercomputer scientist that found the 1 binary million parts to those 64 binary thousand processors. When the name of my new supercomputer is spelled by 1 binary million or 1,048,576 zeros and ones, my grand challenge became to find the part as well as name the part. Who can memorize the full name of a never-before-seen supercomputer that comprised of 1,048,576 unique arrangements of a string of zeros and ones? In the 1980s, I was the lone wolf supercomputer scientist that was outside the supercomputer community and the outsider that traveled the road less traveled and did so by going out of the way and visualizing along 16 mutually perpendicular directions and doing so to find my 2 raised to power 16 processors that was on my way to discovering a new internet. In a manner of speaking, programming the first parallel supercomputer and programming it to solve a grand challenge problem was akin to attempting to memorize the names of every man, woman, and child in Johannesburg, South Africa. Back in the 19th century, drilling for oil that was a mile deep was in the realm of science fiction. Back in 1859, oil workers said to their boss, "Drill for oil." "You mean drill into the ground to try and find oil? You are crazy." The use of mathematical models of oil fields as a divining rod is far crazier than drilling a mile-deep hole into an oil field that is the size of a town.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.